The book of Job, verse 3. Mortals put an end to the darkness. They search out the farthest recesses for ore in the blackest darkness. Christian Righteous Gamer. So I hope everybody's having a good day. So today I want to talk a little bit about the Lord of the Rings, or maybe even just showing a level of like respect and honor and appreciation to the community and to the fan base, and also to Tolkien, right? In holiness, if God is willing, to glorify God at the end of the day always. But may God bless and rest Tolkien's soul. And also, in holiness, may God bless the entire community, the people who will remain faithful. I appreciate you from whatever effort you think I have, and I think it's good. And I like the fact that you remained you remain true to your fantasy world fictional beliefs. And I deeply appreciate that. I just want to let you know. Okay, so I don't know if this is going to be like a super deep video or anything. I'll just give some I'll give some opinions. I'll talk about some Christian, a little bit of a Christian conservative point of view on some of these things. So I'll get this out of the way at the beginning, right? So there is a handful of things that are kind of dangerous. I guess you could say they're a little bit naughty within the Lord of the Rings. That as a Christian, especially as a Christian, we do got to be careful with. So there is magic. As a person of the faith, we know magic is generally, for the most part, just an evil thing. God condemns magic. I understand it's a fantasy world, but for the most part, magic is bad. I understand that as a person of the faith, in a fantasy world, I personally think, and I'm not the moral authority, in holiness, I'm not God. Only God is God. I'm just a sinner. But like using it for healing, or you represent like a Christian by good or holiness or righteousness with some of these things, it could be considered understandable. But stuff like being a mage, that stuff is bad. Okay, so obviously that's one really big negative thing. And to tell you the truth, the Lord of the Rings is basically the same thing as all of the other fantasy D&D and stuff. It's just a different stroke with the paintbrush for a different variation. And they do have quote unquote a false god, and then there are some demons, and there is some other stuff that's kind of shady in the world. I don't need to go into that too much, but there are things you got to be careful about, right? So obviously, I'm gonna get that out of the way, right? Okay. But okay, so that's enough of me being super negative, right? So obviously, there's reasons you got to be. You should always be wise, right? Have some intelligence, right? Okay, but I do think there is a tremendous amount of net positive. Really, it's just I'll say this to start with, right? I really, 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 really like. And I really enjoy pretty much all the movies and stuff that has to do with Lord of the Rings. Now, The Rings of Power, I haven't watched that. That's a disgrace to the series. I don't even consider that to be, it's not canonized. I basically hate that series. Now, someday I might watch it. I'll probably have to, drink multiple caffeine doses just to stay awake, because apparently it's just such a boring, terrible show. But I don't really consider, The Rings of Power to really be linked to Lord of the Rings. And that's just a disdain to the series. But the Lord of the Rings have amazing boss fight scenes, and they have these epic battles. It has a legendary music track, great acting. There's just so many things about the movies themselves. And The Hobbit, I do like the Hobbit movies, and they're not considered to be as good as obviously not anywhere near as good as the Lord of the Rings. I still like them, to be honest. They're a fun little kind of a cute adventure you can go through. And I know that people find that to be offensive. I like the prequels of Star Wars. Obviously, they're not really as good as the originals, but they're still good. They're still, and you got. Usually prequels and stuff like that aren't really as good as the originals, but they're still fun, right? They're still fun to watch, and they might offer you some kind of value. Oh, what am I clicking on elves now all of a sudden? Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And okay. So Tolkien is obviously a legendary writer, and I mean he's basically responsible for pretty much all fantasy in general. I mean, at least especially like the more core foundation of fantasy. Like you got Dungeons and Dragons, you got even like Magic the Gathering, you got all the different fantasy genres and themes. Tolkien pretty much is like the founding father of all that, for the most part. And I mean, also Tolkien was, as far as I know, he was a Christian. He was part of the Catholic Church. I mean, he's been dead for a while, but I don't know for sure if he's saved or not. But as far as I know, he was a believer, and he maintained his faith until his death. So I give him his commends. May he rest in peace. And there's also C.S. Lewis, who also claimed to be a person of the faith until he died also. And he also made the Chronicles of Narnia. I'll be honest, I really love the Chronicles of Narnia. So I mean, they're like brothers in the faith, and that's something I think is really good too. Okay, click on elves here. Let's see here. Whoops. Other stuff I got to look at. So there's Gandalf. I mean, I'm not going to go into the negatives. I mean, he basically represents the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what people like claim about him. He's kind of like a Christ-like figure. Now, I'm going to be real with somebody. I'm not a massive. I'm not super versed in the lore of a lot of content, because like I mean, if it's not real, I don't really feel like it's just not something I care about that much. I mean, I care about to an extent, but it's not really real. But it doesn't mean it's not cool, and it doesn't mean I don't know anything about it. But I'm not super versed into it either. But I also think that to an extent we can show respect to things too. So, and there is a lot of Christian themes in it too. And let's see here. And I do give props that the community is really strong, and they still maintain a lot of strength. And people really learn about, and care about, like the lore of series like these, which I think is extremely commendable. And again, like, it would be so easy to just like abandon it and stuff. But like, there are professors in colleges. There's so many people that have a deep sense of lore to this, who study this, who show it respect and who show it honor. And I mean, I do give them, a level of props to that, right? That, and people who continue to read it, they read the books. Tolkien made his own, his own language, and there's so many net positives at the end of the day, right? And I deeply respect that. I have a deep found respect for the community, and for as far as I know, I mean, it is basically it is a Christian series too. You got a demon, basically. You got in holiness, Gandalf sort of reflects Christ. He's not. I mean, it's hard to really. It's not a one-for-one biblical story. It's not a biblical story, but it does have lots of Christian themes in it. Gandalf leads the team of the Fellowship, and eventually he fights this demon. And Gandalf is generally a force for good, more often than not. He might be a little bit neutral sometimes, but for the most part, he is a good person. And again, Lord of the Rings reflects good versus evil, and I do like that. Like, there's so many reasons that I like the series. So I mean, at some point I'm probably gonna buy Amazon, the Amazon Plus or Amazon Prime for a month. I need to watch the Fallout TV show. I'm pretty sure Lord of the Rings is on there. I probably just need to go through and rewatch this again. I haven't seen it in a while. Granted, I mean, I've seen it enough times. It's not like you're gonna, if you're a nerd, it's not like you're gonna forget Lord of the Rings. You might need a like a polished tune-up, and maybe you don't remember all the names or everything about it, you ain't gonna forget Lord of the Rings. Unless you've got like a psychological problem, like, I mean, you're still gonna remember it. Like, it is one of the most legendary series. It's like Star Wars, right? It's like that legendary based. I mean, I haven't forgotten the series, but it's still fun to go through it again. So yeah, I mean, I would be interested in I'd be interested in going back again, and frankly, I would be interested in watching the prequels they made of The Hobbit again, because I mean, you know, it is a really, and they have video games that are amazing. They have the what's it called, like the Two Towers. They have that video game. I think it's on like the GameCube. That game is incredible. They also have, I mean, you know, there's just a whole bunch of content out there. There's video games, and I mean, I wouldn't even begin to be able to remember or to explain half of the stuff out there. But it's definitely a series that I like, and I've always kind of liked the series. Now, I mean, it's also kind of like, you know, as a Christian, fantasy is kind of a little bit shady sometimes. I mean, you got to be careful, like, keeping your mind safe from fantasy. I mean, I do enjoy fantasy, and I have for many years in my life. I kind of took a year off of fantasy, even on my YouTube channel. I've come coming back to it more recently, but because fantasy is very dangerous in a lot of ways too. It's very dangerous for your mind. Now, I mean, there's a lot of benefits, right? But if you're being real with yourself, you do got to be careful. You do got to be careful, right? But it is a lot of fun too, and it can be good for your mind in a lot of ways too. It can be good to escape from reality every once in a while, but you know, fantasy can fill your mind with all sorts of, it can fill your mind with all sorts of stuff. So, you know, you just got to be careful too, right? Again, I stand with the community, right? And like what they did with the Lord, the Rings of Power, I just honestly feel like that was just unacceptable. And granted, I don't know the lore that well, but I respect Tolkien for what he did. What he did was incredible, right? And in a ways, it superseded his life, and this became his legacy. Yeah, this became like his legacy. I know he had children, but the Lord of the Rings, it became something incredible. And you know, I love the fact that there's an amazing community. And I know I made a little video, I think like 6 months ago. I mean, I was just I called it Exposing the Darkness and like the Lord of the Rings. Personally, I didn't really even necessarily want to make that video, but like at the same time, I know it kind of offended a handful of people, but the truth be told, I really only made that video because I was trying to be objective, right? Like I can't just criticize a fantasy genre of one area and then just like not criticize another one just because I happen to be very favorable towards it. You know, like I like it's like, you know, like I like the Lord of the Rings a lot, right? And, you know, because there's lots of Christian themes into it. But I can't just say like, you know, I can't just criticize a company that, I can't just say like, here's 10 companies, right? And these 10 companies, I'm gonna reveal all the darkness that could exist within that franchise. And then I'm just not gonna do the company that I like. Like, you know, I like the Lord of the Rings. It's basically has Christian themes, and it was made by a person of the faith. So I'm just gonna overlook. I'm not gonna judge it, and I'm just gonna completely 100% overlook this franchise. But I'm gonna judge every other franchise. I mean, like that's not very objective, and that's not a very fair standard. So you gotta have fair standards. So the reason I made that video initially, I think I just got rid of it. I just was like, I just don't feel like dealing with it. But I mean, I made that video originally, and And even like, even like what other franchises, right? Because in a lot of ways, I did genuinely feel like I couldn't have, at the time, I couldn't have like double standards. Now, obviously, again, I am very partial towards certain franchises a lot more. But I mean, again, it's not fair standards to be partial either. It's like, I mean, I've over many years, I've really liked Pokemon a lot, right? But I can't just say, oh, I'm not going to judge the bad stuff that could exist in Pokemon just because I like Pokemon, right? I'm not being very fair. I'm being, in a lot of ways, it's kind of evil in its own right. It is morally evil at the same time to decide that you're only going to judge certain people and certain things for certain reasons, and then things that you like or you agree with, you're just going to not judge those. So that's kind of why I made that video, just so I could try to teach myself a little more how to be objective. And I know it made a lot of people mad, and I understand that, but I can't just criticize certain things and then not criticize other things. Okay, so again, I really like Lord of the Rings, and I really respect what Tolkien made. It is extremely beautiful. It is a beautiful world. It has like an amazing book series. Granted, I've never read the books myself, but like from what I've known, there's a lore to it. It has just an amazing soundtrack. I think Nerdrotic. Shout out to that guy. But like, he talked about how, I listened to a video he said, and he talked about like how like the soundtrack is like a character of its own, and then there is truth to that. The soundtrack is just amazing, right? And I also like the fact that like his name is Peter Jackson. He talked about how he wanted to make the series as faithful as he could. Now, I mean, he had to change it a little bit, but I mean, he tried to be very faithful to what the book said, and I respect that a lot, right? Honoring the lore. This is an ideal that this is an ideological value that I have deep levels of respect for. It's people who honor things that came in the past. You don't have to agree with everything. And if something is really, really, really dark, or like filled with like rancid demonic evil, you should call that out, right? But if something is pretty neutral, and it's older, and like it's just really well made, there's a truth that showing respect is good, and that's the kind of moral values that I'd rather have. Is being more of like a conservative Christian. I do believe in I do like that belief system. Showing honor and respect to lore and to characters and to stories and to things of the past. And to be honest with somebody, I mean, I've never really always been that kind of a person, but I've kind of lived a lot of my life being pretty neutral about a lot of things. But I do have the deepest respect for people who show respect to things that I believe who ultimately deserve it. And like, it's not something that's really subjective. It's an objective truth. And I do think in a lot of ways, respecting franchises and content and IP, especially when it's really old. And it's like the idea, it's like basically the idea of like biblical, right? And it's not pissing on the things that came about in the past, and showing respect to, it's like the idea of like, to a lot of people, Lord of the Rings is basically like sacred. It's a sacred franchise. And a lot of these franchises in the past, they're kind of, in a lot of ways, they're deemed as like sacred. And I think that's a good thing. Obviously, as a Christian, like in holiness, only truly God himself and the things that he has helped build in righteousness are truly sacred. But it's like an ideological value. And like it talks about in the Bible how basically the people who have fallen away from the faith and are basically on their way to destruction, they view nothing as sacred. And I do like the fact that there are people out there, and and honestly, even myself too, right? Like, we value, like, we as nerds, right? Like, obviously I'm like a super nerd, right? But I don't know how much of a nerd you are, but I know I'm definitely a massive nerd. But we value certain things as like sacred. I think that's a good thing. Obviously we should spend more time with God and walk in Him walk with him in his ways, in holiness. But I do think it's good to value certain things as like being like sacred, and giving things incredible value, especially when it's earned and deserved. And it's like, there's a lot of franchises out there that have great video games, great content, and that deserve a lot of respect and deserve to be shown tremendous honor. I mean, again, even if you disagree with something, you should still show it respect, because it deserves respect. And it's time tested and proven true over the course of many years. It could be 100+ years, it could be thousands of years. It deserves respect, and you should hold it to a high esteem and a high light. And I like that. That's a good. It's like the. Also, you could say like the moral virtue of loyalty. That's a wonderful virtue. And like you got Lord of the Rings. It could really be any franchise, right? It could be fantasy franchises. It could be more realistic worlds. It could be fictional. It could even be like a very deep Christian series. Especially when they deserve it. And I like that ideal. And we don't have to our fathers before us built these great things, and we should honor it. Because honoring your family is good. And to be honest, it doesn't, at a certain point, showing something, perceiving something as being sacred, it doesn't matter what they've done or said. Maybe the people who made it had some problems. Maybe people along the way, they committed some sins. But you should still show them honor and respect. And especially the properties themselves, like IPs. And I know that a lot of people in modern day times are not very faithful with this, and they just are very disrespectful. And I appreciate like the YouTubers out there, again, even that guy like Nerdrotic, right? And you got like all those kinds of people. They stand up for the fans, and they stand up for the IPs, and it's a very honorable behavior. And I respect the honorable behavior, because like you don't have to change these IPs, you don't have to change these franchises. Just keep them the way they are. Or if you're gonna have to, if you control it and you have to make a change, try to be as faithful to the lore or to the way that it's supposed to be done, and only do some minor changes to it. Or or just if you're gonna, or just don't put something in the content, like just ignore that part of the content. Or you don't have to change the story. You have to change past characters. You don't have to do all that kind of stuff. In a lot of ways, it is very disrespectful. Or they come in with they have some kind of agenda or narrative or something, and they want to change all the stuff in it because it offends them, because you live in the year 2024 and it offends you that 50 years ago something existed. And also a lot of ways it's hubris. Like what right do you have to change something that existed for such a long time that so many people enjoyed, just because you personally feel like you have some right to do that? It is extremely disrespectful. And going forward, I'm just going to say, anytime where I've been really disrespectful, especially when it's undeserved, right? Now, there are certain things, as a person of faith, we as Christians should disagree. But you can still respect something and disagree. I want to say, I do genuinely repent. Obviously I repent to God for my soul, but I repent for all the times where I've been, and I know it's just kind of saying some words, right? But it's at least a start, right? All the times where I've been I basically just been so narcissistic in the past. Not even the past couple years, but just years of my life. I've shown such a lack of respect to franchises and to IPs. And I do want to say, I know in a lot of ways I am genuinely sorry. I know I'm not really sorry to any person who's going to read this, but just even saying it, right? I've shown such a lack of respect to certain things. I'm not saying even on my YouTube channel, but just over the years, and just my mindset in general. I've had such an attitude of a lack of thankfulness and appreciation for the things that I've had, and I've shown such massive disrespect to things, and half the time especially in the past, it was incredibly unwarranted of me. And that is just something, I feel like this level of shame inside, right? I know a lot of people do. And I mean, I'm not saying I know on my YouTube channel, I mean, I really haven't done anything I really don't think is wrong. I mean, you could some people you could have emotional arguments, but just my attitude in life, especially when in the past. It's like I'm in my early 30s now, but like when I was in my 20s or younger, I was just so disrespectful towards so many people, and for no reason. I never showed my appreciation. I never honored the things that I had. I was just like some pissant, disrespectful, almost like a pagan, just like some liberal pagan when I was younger. I was just a stupid person, and I genuinely believe that I was wrong. And at least now, when I'm older, I mean, in holiness, I believe God has granted me the ability to, to see reasoning in my ways. So I mean, at least my goal, I think now, I mean, even for like my YouTube channel, like I want to show respect to things, especially when they're deserved. Ultimately though, to show respect to God, and to make sure you go to heaven, right, at the end of the day. Again, even to like the United States of America, and like how even like the stuff like the flags or like our traditions, and I was so disrespectful when I was younger, and I do feel a lot of remorse for that, and I believe that my actions were morally wrong. And I am sorry, and to some extent, I'm not even sure who I'm really sorry to. I'm just sorry in general, just because it's because I just believe that attitude of not honoring the things that came in the past, like not honoring. Like when I grew up in the United States of America, and I still live here. I'm so privileged. I have so many opportunities, and I just, the lack of respect that I've shown this country, and then that in itself is just morally wrong. All the people who died for this country, all the hard work. I've just been such an entitled, like narcissistic, like pissant towards all my opportunities in life. I mean, going forward, I think that's just going to change, right? I'm trying to show more respect and show more honor to things that deserve it. Not everybody deserves it, but I mean, sometimes there's also grace too. But I do appreciate the people in the past. I mean, maybe, probably, to tell you the truth, vast majority of those people are not even alive. But I do appreciate the people who died for me, and the people who gave up their lives for this country, and the people who made all these great entertainment. I know that the man who made Dragon Ball Z, he recently passed away. There's a man who made Yu-Gi-Oh, he passed away, and like a lot of these people who built these franchises are dead. And that's the inevitable reality of life, but. I mean, I'm thankful for the people who made these IPs. Sure, there is bad stuff at times in them, but there's also a lot of good, and they're also great content. So I appreciate it, like, right? I just want to say, I appreciate. I think going forward, I think I want to start learning to show more respect and honor to things that deserve it. And I want to have a level of sacredness to things, like the things can be sacred. I mean, I can be picky with some of those things, but I believe certain things can and have the right to be regarded as sacred. I think I want to make them more of an effort going forward. I want to make more of an effort to to hold a higher value to things, especially if like in the long term, right? It's long-term objective, and to make an effort to not just be so blatantly like closed-minded and like just like basically cold and hateful about things they don't need to be. That doesn't deserve it. I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, like we can be selective and picky. Certain things deserve more disdain and certain things deserve more respect. And yeah, I mean, I got like the Lord of the Rings, right? Like I was talking about earlier. I'm about to wrap this up here soon. I just want to say, like, thank you to all the people who remain faithful to the lore for Lord of the Rings, and also in general to whatever other franchises there are. And you can disagree with certain things in them, but I'm appreciative of, I'm appreciative of this great writing and great lore that I've had a chance to experience. So yeah, I mean, and also, holiness, thank you to God for being, God is always faithful and good. And there is that truth, right? And I mean, there's so much great content out there we've had a chance to experience, and who's to say? Maybe more great stuff can be written. So yeah, like the Lord of the Rings, it's an amazing franchise, and I've loved watching them, and I love the battles and the music, and the characters, and just so many things about it I love. I appreciate it. I'm thankful I had a chance to watch them, and maybe I'll try watching them again someday. All right, thanks. God is good.